Okay. Welcome, everyone. I want to officially welcome you this evening to Building Resilience in the Time of COVID and other scary times, I guess. My name is Samantha Lurie. I am an adult services librarian for the Northville District Library. And joining us tonight is Andrea Nitzkin from Bright Spot. Is it counseling? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. And as we go along, it is a little interactive. So if you want to turn your camera on, that does help her. It's not a requirement, so if you don't feel comfortable, but it is kind of nice to see faces. And then if you have questions for her as we go along, you can send her private chat messages. So you go to the chat box and you change who your recipient is, and you just choose Andy, and then she'll be able to see that privately. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Oh, hi, everybody. So as you heard, my name's Andy. I've been a therapist for 15 years. And I created this presentation mostly because of wanting to do something that I thought would be helpful to people during this time, because we were all struggling so much. So I actually created it probably almost a year ago. And I've done this presentation now for a lot of professional staffs, but also for community groups like you. And really, I encourage you to ask questions. And I'm very, very good at camouflaging all details. So if you chat me privately in the box as Sam suggested, I'm really careful about it. So before we start, I want to just encourage all of you to just take a moment or two. I don't know who just rushed home from work, who just quickly fed a family and just kind of scooted onto a couch or a bedroom to just be able to have a little bit of quiet time for this. So I want to just encourage you all to just take a moment or two for a little centering, to bring yourselves into the present. Take a couple long, good, deep breaths. They can really relax your body, calm your nervous system. You can even close your eyes for a moment if you want, but just take a moment or two, maybe let your eyes rest on something in your environment and really take in the details of it. That's a really beautiful way to bring yourself right into this moment. If you have a picture on the wall or a pretty view out a window, it's really a nice way to sort of bring yourself into the moment and away from whatever it was that you just raced through in transition time. So just a moment or two. Maybe one more good breath. I hope some of you can feel your body sort of settle down a little bit, settle into the moment. It's amazing how quickly just giving ourselves the gift of even 45 seconds can make a difference. So I'm happy to have any of you who wish to ask me questions in the midst of what I'm sharing. It doesn't throw me off or bother me at all. If you want, I will keep an eye on the chat if anybody wants to do it privately, but also you can certainly unmute yourselves and ask me a question, and I don't mind. So I created this presentation, as I said, just to help people cope with everything we've lived through during this time. I'm sure by now all of you have heard the statement, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all on the same boat. Some of us are in canoes and some are on kayaks and some are on tugboats. And everyone's having their own experience as they move through this time. And so I wanted to do something that sort of acknowledged that, and also to just say, I know in my own life, I've lost people to COVID. My husband also had it, and by some miracle, I didn't get it. A close friend was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. So it definitely has touched my life and also made me aware that for those of us who have lost a loved one, whether it was from COVID or from anything during this time, we can't come together as a community the way we normally would. Maybe now we can because some rules are being changed and restrictions are being lifted. But for many of us, if you did lose somebody during this year for whatever reason, you couldn't mourn and grieve the way we typically would mourn and grieve. And so I just want to take a moment and acknowledge that. And for those of you who've had losses, I truly am sorry. And I encourage you to, maybe now that some of the rules have changed, maybe now you can do something ritualistic that'll give you some comfort around that loss. I know that's what we did. It helped a little bit. So I wanted to just share a little bit of an overview, and I wanted to let you know there is no PowerPoint with this, and it's very, very deliberate on my part. My hope is that you'll all sit back and just relax. Treat this not like a lecture, but more like just an opportunity for some nurturing self-care. And what I found so far is what you need will stick with you, and the rest will wash away. And really, if you end this time and you've gotten maybe 2 or 3 things from it, to me, that's a success. So please don't feel anxious about trying to capture all of it. As Sam said, it's going to be recorded, and I don't have any proprietary kind of interests. Like, I just want to help people. So if you feel like you want to see it again in a month or 2, just call the library and ask. It's all fine with me. So what I'm going to cover is a little piece of mental health, and model around resilience and coping that's evidence-based. So what I'm teaching you has actually been studied for a couple of decades. It was created by 2 professors. A little bit of my own tips that I try to share with my own clients and my loved ones that I incorporated. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit of mindfulness relaxation work. So that's what the presentation covers. And again, I encourage questions whenever you want. So I wanted to first talk about anxiety, depression, and grief. So, and the reason is that while we all use these words all the time, we don't always know the full scope of what those conditions can look like. And so we don't always recognize in ourselves when we're struggling through one of those conditions. And we also don't always realize in our loved ones that that's really what's happening with them. So I wanted to talk first about anxiety. Anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, unease, typically about something that has an uncertain outcome. It can impact us cognitively, physically, and emotionally. So people who have anxiety feel jitters in their nervous system. Maybe they have stomach upset. Maybe their chest tightens or breathing becomes shallow, sweaty palms, upset tummy, like not just in terms of how it feels, but when you eat, everything kind of goes through you. It can cause fatigue, difficulty concentrating, disturbing racing thoughts, changes in sleeping and eating, and one of the big ones is avoidance of certain situations. Anxiety can be fleeting and situational, like a long time ago, thankfully it subsided. I used to get incredibly nervous doing public speaking. I kind of forced myself to do it a lot. So now I don't, but boy, did I have a lot of those symptoms every time I would do public speaking. So it can be very situational. It can also be chronic. Many of us walk around with all kinds of racing thoughts, worrying thoughts that affect us all the time, and we don't recognize it's actually anxiety, and we can learn tools to help us. I always encourage people to try tools for medications. So there's a lot of strategies that can help with it. So anxiety can also make people kind of reactive emotionally because they're struggling. They're coping through something that's hard, and it can make them a little more irritable or cause them to isolate a little bit more. So behaviorally, there's other things that people sometimes do. They don't realize it's anxiety driven. Depression. Depression can cause feelings of despondency, hopelessness, helplessness, cause people to feel like they're worthless. It can cause them to feel very alone in this world. It also affects us cognitively, physically, and emotionally. So depression too can make it so that we can't concentrate, we can't retain information well. It can cause also fatigue, disruption in our eating and sleeping. It can look like we're melancholy or we're lethargic or we have lost interest in certain things. But what people often don't realize about depression is it can also very much look like somebody who's just really irritable, highly reactive, confrontational, argumentative. And that person may not present at all as melancholy or lethargic. So in our society, we tend to stereotype depression as somebody who's weepy, kind of on a couch and shut down, melancholy. We never tend to talk about in our society the fact that it can be somebody who's really irritable, very reactive, very quick to outbursts. And that very much is depression too. You can have depression and not necessarily have the presence of a lot of anxious symptoms, but almost always if people have anxiety, they have some measure of depression because it's just a hard way to live. And so over time, they become depressed. So I wanted to share that because so often we don't recognize in ourselves some of these symptoms, or we don't recognize in our loved ones that, our loved one who's really irritable or up in the middle of the night a lot and says, my head just keeps going and I can't shut my head down, my thoughts down, that these are signs of some mental health challenges. When we're coping with something difficult, which we all have been for the last 15 months, we tend to have a much greater chance of succumbing in some measure to depression and anxiety because coping drains us. And we are not really wired to cope for really long, extended periods of time. Our bodies, our nervous systems, our brains, they have remarkable mechanisms built into them to let us cope through things that are hard, but we all get coping fatigue. And when we get coping fatigue, there's a greater chance we'll also have anxiety, depression kind of seep into our days. And so that's why I wanted to share a little bit about this. I also wanted to talk for a moment about grief. We always think about grief as grief for a loved one. We don't tend to think about grief as often around a way of life or a big life change. People experience grief when they end a job, even if it was something they wanted. They grieve for the parts of their job that they loved or their coworkers. People grieve when they move. People often grieve when they retire. That's a known thing. People go through grief when they get a medical diagnosis that's going to be challenging to live with. So there's many, many things that cause us grief. During COVID, many of us have experienced grief because our way of life changed so dramatically. We became so isolated. We had to give up activities and things that we were passionate about. Our jobs changed. Even if we continued to work during this whole time, working from home for many of us meant losing parts of our jobs that we very much loved, like engaging with other people, colleagues, or the public, or being creative in certain ways that kind of changed when we came home. So all of our socialization ended. A lot of our rituals have been gone. So grief has been a very real part of our lives since the beginning of COVID. And so I wanted to share that because grief can also cause us to have a hard time concentrating, to become more forgetful, to feel a little like we just don't have the energy or the oomph to do things, even if we loved them. So I'm hoping that in sharing some of this, it may help some of you recognize in yourselves some of what maybe you've been dealing with, or whoever it is you're living with, or your loved ones, and have some compassion on yourselves. These are all very, very normal conditions for what we've all been living through. And when you can recognize you or a loved one or a friend or a colleague is struggling with some of this, compassion and empathy can go a long way to helping us work through it or support each other through it. So that's why I wanted to touch on those. I'm just going to look quickly at the chat and see if anybody had any questions. Okay. So now that I kind of painted a picture of what may be hard for you in going through this time or some of your loved ones, I want to tell you some tools that help with it. So the model I'm going to teach you, and again, you don't have to write it down. What's important for you in your own life will stick with you. And then, of course, there's the recording if you want it. But the model I'm going to teach you is called Basic pH. It was developed by two professors, I believe like 30 years ago or so, for a different country. And it was a country that had a lot of turmoil and strife and security issues. And so these professors developed this model to try and help people cope. It's since been used all over the world. It was taught after 9/11 to the first responders in New York and to the people just of New York. It's been used, for instance, in Haiti after the earthquake. So it's been taken around the world now and used after like natural disasters or terrorist attacks. So the model is called Basic pH. You can Google it if you want, and then you for sure don't have to write anything down. So the B stands for our belief system, whether that's your spirituality, your religious practice that's more institutional, or your value system. The B is for belief, and it has to do with recognizing how maybe you lived your belief system before COVID, and has that gone out of your life? So if you were somebody who was part of a meditation circle, or you had a weekly yoga practice that really kind of rooted you and centered you in your life and calmed you and made you think in a different way, and that had to end. Or you went to church every week, or you prayed in a mosque or a temple, whatever your practice is, if it's completely absent in your life, can you find a way to bring it back? The way I think of this model, I should have prefaced this, and so I apologize. Each one of these things, I want you to think of as being like a pillar. And each of these pillars, when they're present in your life, hold up a roof over your head that's your well-being, your personal sense of well-being as you move through your days. When too many pillars are missing, or some are short and some are tall and some are cracked, your roof starts to teeter, or it just collapses totally. So each of these things I'm going to teach you, think of as a pillar in your life, and just ask yourself, is this still in my life, or has it gone out of my life? So the first one is your belief system. And there's ways to be creative to put back a practice that maybe you've lost. If you meditated in a meditation circle, call one or two of the people who were part of that with you and do it by Zoom, or do it outside. If you were a regular churchgoer and that's still shut down for you in your congregation, many of the churches are doing Zoom services, or go to a different church and do their Zoom service. So I encourage you to be creative and find ways to put it back. The A for basic pH is affect. Noticing your own mental health and well-being. When you wake up in the morning, if you feel out of sorts, notice it, pay attention to it. Don't just say, oh, I'm blue today. Be more descriptive. Blue is a word that we use easily, or stressed is a word that we use easily, because they sort of feel like we're not really addressing mental health issues. Dig a little deeper. Don't just say I'm stressed. Are you anxious? Is there something scaring you? Are you fearful that maybe you won't be able to pay your bills at the end of the month? Are you fearful because a loved one's living with COVID? Are you fearful that somebody's business is going under? Are you fearful that maybe your job may be pared back? So ask yourself deeper questions. If you're blue, are you really actually lonely? Are you feeling rejected? Are you feeling just way too isolated? Are you feeling unmotivated? So only when we ask ourselves these deeper questions can we get to the answers we need to address whatever the condition is we have for on a given day. So we ask yourself, how do I feel today? Because then it helps you know what you need. It also helps you tell those around you a little bit about where you're at. If you wake up and you're just irritable and crabby, it's really helpful for you to say to your loved ones, today is one of those days. I'm irritable and crabby. It has nothing to do with you. I'm not even sure what's triggering it, but I just can tell that's where I'm at. And this is what I need. So pay attention to your affect. The S is for maintaining our social engagement. It's something we've all struggled with. Thank goodness spring is here. Summer's around the corner. The weather is better. Just a walk in a neighborhood lets you have a little social contact. You can be with people outside now. We can gather some of our loved ones in our homes together. We couldn't before. So this has actually gotten a little easier in the last month or so. But the S is for maintaining some social engagement. Some of us who are really anxious, we don't feel ready for that yet. We're too scared to. So what I would say is, if that's you, ask yourself if you can put it back in your life, but in a way where you can still feel safe. If you're scared about gathering in a home with other people, even if you've been vaccinated and so have they, do it outside. Go outside and gather a little more at a distance. Be a little creative. It's okay. Or if you're just really feeling anxious around it, give yourself some more time. It's okay. Just wait a little and connect through the phone if that's what feels best to you right now. But social engagement is part of what we all need for our resilience. The I is for imagination, connecting to our dreams, connecting to our creativity. Most of what we do all day long, we're not using the creative aspect of our brains, that other hemisphere. I always get confused if it's the right or the left, but we don't use it very much. And it's good for our brains to engage our creativity. It's also good for us to engage our imagination. So COVID made it so that we couldn't have anticipatory joy. We couldn't say, next week, I'm really excited. I'm going to go hear music in a park, or I'm going to go to a theater, or I'm going to go to my friend's house for a party. It sort of took away a lot of anticipation. We can use our imaginations to put it back. You can spend time planning a trip, even if you don't think you're going to take it for 5 years, doesn't matter. You can spend time dreaming about a hobby you want to engage in that maybe you can't until the world shifts a little, like taking art classes somewhere. So try to see if you can re-engage your imagination. Try and see if you can re-engage your creativity. The C is for cognitive stimulation. When I can see more people, and it's okay that I can't, but I usually say, like, raise your hand, and I ask some questions. And a couple of the questions I ask are, when was the last time you did something new? Or in the last 3 months, have you tried something new? Have you learned a new skill? Have you listened to a different kind of music than you normally do? Have you explored an area that you don't usually go to, a park, a town? Have you gone to a museum, even virtually? Because we need cognitive stimulation. And even if we're all working, we need a different kind of cognitive stimulation for our own self-care than what we get at work. So maybe that's reading, but for many, many of us, we can't concentrate on novels right now, or even nonfiction, because it's hard to retain information. It's hard to concentrate because this is a hard time. So what I encourage people to do is read poetry instead, or read short stories, or read blogs on things that maybe are not your normal area of interest, or go on TED Talks and listen to TED Talks, or podcasts. These are all things, or get a subscription to a magazine that's like not your typical area of interest, and just get the subscription for a few months and see if it stimulates your head or some new ideas. We need newness. We need to feed our brains. It helps us manage all the stress. So the last part of the model is PH. That's for being physical. I'm not saying you have to exercise 30 minutes a day every day. This is not that. Although I'll talk a little bit more about caring for our bodies in a minute. But we know that many of us sit most of the day for our work. We're in front of a screen and we're not getting much movement. And so this is just a reminder, stand up every now and then and stretch, walk for 15 minutes, go up and down your stairs a couple of times, move around, dance, turn on some fun music and dance, get some movement because we need it to help with chronic pain. We need it to help with our energy levels. We need it to prevent pain and injury. And then of course it creates happy chemicals in our brains too. So that's the model that's evidence-based and taught. I added to it because I feel like there's some other parts of this that are really valuable. So one is paying attention to sleep, diet, and routines. I think of our routines as sort of the scaffolding, not scaffolding, but the inner structure of our buildings, right? Getting up every day, washing your face, showering, brushing your teeth, making your bed, things like that make us feel better. Going to sleep around the same time every night. Many of us are struggling with sleep right now. It's been very common all through COVID. Some people can't fall asleep at night. Some people wake up in the middle of the night and they can't fall back asleep. So for many people, sleep is a challenge. I can talk for a few minutes about sleep hygiene, but it might mean that I can't get to other things, but I can encourage you, Google sleep hygiene if that's you, and you can learn a lot of tips. Things like no caffeine after 5, nothing real sugary after 5, trying to go to sleep around the same time every night, give or take 45 minutes, don't drink within an hour and a half of going to sleep. Don't eat within an hour and a half going to sleep because then your body digests and it throws off your sleep. So that's just a few things. If you Google sleep hygiene, you'll learn a lot, what kind of temperature to set your room at for optimal sleep. So you can learn a lot of tips that way, but I'm trying to save time at the end of the presentation so I can do some mindfulness work with you. It can also help with sleep. Diet. If you're leaning on food a little bit right now to cope with COVID, it's very common. There's a reason for it. From the time we open our eyes, food is nurturing, food is comfort. We skin a knee, we're handed a cookie. We cry because we're sad, we're handed a sucker. We celebrate a birthday, there's a cake. Something sad happens, we have a luncheon afterwards. Like, food is so woven into who we are as humans that, of course, when we're stressed or sad or worried or anxious or depressed, food can be a real comfort. So what I'll say to you is, don't beat yourself up about it. It's hardwired into us. Just try as hard as you can to make your meals as healthful as you can. That's where you compensate. If right now having a little bit of Ben & Jerry's right out of the container at night is kind of what's your treat at the end of a hard day, you don't have to deprive yourself, but make sure you eat a healthy breakfast and a healthy lunch and a healthy dinner. And when I say healthy, I mean not a lot of processed junk that has tons of sodium and lots of chemicals and maybe isn't so balanced. Make sure you're getting lots of colors from fruits and vegetables, lots of whole grains, lower fat animal products like salmon or chicken breasts, as opposed to things like bacon. So just try to eat healthfully. And if you have a rough day where you have some ice cream and then it's followed up with some potato chips, and then you reach for a cookie and then a handful of chocolate, and just forgive yourself, and the next day try to do a little better. That's it. Nature. Getting into nature is really healing for us. It distresses us. In fact, studies have shown that even looking at images of nature actually calms our nervous systems down. So right now we're all living with a tremendous amount of stress, and our brains are kicking out chemicals that are not meant to be in our bodies all day, every day, like cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine and epinephrine. These are things that we need to handle stressful situations, but those stressful situations are supposed to be more like outrunning a tiger or hitting the brake when somebody cuts you off on the highway. They're not meant to be in our bodies all day, every day. Nature helps with that. Get outside, go for a walk, pay attention to blue sky, listen for all the different kinds of birds you hear, take in good inhales and see if you can notice all the smells. Right now, if I walk in my neighborhood, I feel like every 30 feet, there's a new smell because everything is blooming. So the more you engage your senses in nature and slow down, the better it is for your body and your brain. The more your nervous system settles down, and the more your brain shifts from producing stress chemicals to producing chemicals like dopamine, or endorphins, which are happy chemicals. So get out in nature. And then the last thing I want to say is now is a time to focus on empathy, patience, and gratitude. Empathy for those around us, because we all need it and it sure feels good when we get it. Patience, because coping does change dramatically how we function. We just don't function the same way right now, most of us. And if we are today, we probably won't be by Thursday. And if Thursday's our rough day, maybe by Saturday we'll be doing better. But all of us are like this right now. So empathy, patience, and gratitude. Notice what you have to be grateful for. Study after study has shown that when we have a daily practice of gratitude, we notice something in our life to be grateful for, and we name it, we live a little more contented, a little happier. So when you focus on those three things, it kind of comes back with huge bounty. So I want to just check and see. It looks like there still aren't questions, but if anyone has any, please feel free. So those are some of the tips for coping through this and building your resilience. I want to take a little bit of time now to lead you through some practices that may just feel good that you can do anytime for a couple minutes or for longer with a loved one or on your own, that can settle your nervous system, help you relax, calm a head if you can't sleep in the middle of the night, or if you can't fall asleep, or if you can just tell you're having a really irritable day. These are some tools that can help. So I'm going to encourage you now, if you want to just sit back, get really comfortable. If you have shoes on and you want to take them off, take them off. If you have glasses on and you want to take them off, that's fine. If you want to kind of settle back in your chairs, that's good. So get yourselves really comfortable. And I encourage you to either close your eyes or find a spot on a wall or an object and kind of look at it, but blur your vision. The reason for that is I want you to be able to shut down the visual input to your mind, to your brain, so your brain doesn't have to process as much information. The only times typically we have our eyes closed for any length of time is when we're going to sleep. It tells our brains that our bodies are safe, we're not vulnerable. We can stop being so vigilant about our lives. We can relax. So settle in, close your eyes. And I'm going to lead you through a bunch of different exercises, one after another, with your eyes still closed. So first, I want to encourage you to start to lengthen your inhales. You can even count. And then pause. So you hold that breath just for a moment and then lengthen your exhales. And then pause before your inhale. And if you can, it's certainly not required, but if you can breathe in and out through your nose, that also sends your nervous system a signal Your body is not in any way in distress. If you can't, that's totally okay. Some people truly just can't. But if you can, try. And I'm going to invite you as you do this, only if you want, you can put one hand over your chest and one over your abdomen. I'll shift to my camera. So what you may notice is you're taking in these really deep, deep breaths, is that your whole abdomen raises and lowers as you fill with air, because you're really filling your lungs up all the way, which we don't typically do during our days because we tend to take very shallow breaths. Now, as you do this, you can, if you want, picture in your minds two big, beautiful, luminescent balloons. Those can represent your lungs. And you can actually picture them filling with air from the bottom all the way up, and then emptying slowly from the top all the way back down to the bottom. And what you may even notice as you do that is that your body will match to that image. And you will notice that with your inhale, your abdomen extends outward as the bottom of your lungs fill, all the way up to the top, and then your chest will follow. And that then as you exhale, you'll feel your hand on your chest move to your heart, and the hand on your abdomen gently move towards your spine. With every breath, as you picture your lungs filling from the bottom to the top, and then your lungs gently emptying from the top back to the bottom, you're flooding your whole system with oxygen. And you're telling your brain that your body is safe, at peace, that it doesn't have to work so hard, that it can relax, that it doesn't need stress hormones right now. So now, as we've done that, while you're still sitting comfortably, I'm going to invite you to engage in a practice that's a little bit more physical, but your eyes are still closed if that's how you're comfortable. And you can still keep your breathing nice, rich, lengthened, and even. And I'm going to invite you, and I'll guide you through it, to constrict certain muscle groups one at a time and then release. And what we're going to do is we're going to constrict the muscles during an inhale, and then we'll release on an exhale. So while you're still taking these beautiful deep breaths, I invite you to constrict all the muscles in your feet. Hold your toes over. Feel yourself aware of the arch of your own foot. Hold the muscles tightly as you can. And then on your exhale, let it go. And continue breathing at the same pace. Your next inhale, I invite you to do the same thing with your calf muscles. Feel yourself tighten those muscles at the backs of your legs. And hold it. And on your exhale, let it go. Next, when you're ready, on your next inhale, do your thigh muscles. You can even press your feet into the earth and feel yourself tense up those muscles, both in the back of your legs and on the front. Feel them engage. You may even notice your core muscles engage a little bit as you do it. And then when you're ready, let them go. On your next inhale, I invite you to tense up your glute muscles. They hold us all day long. They help us carry our torsos all day. See if you can tighten them up. You may even notice that you rise out of your seat just a little bit, especially if your feet are planted on the earth. On your exhale, let them go. With your next inhale, we're going to do the arms. You can clench your hands into fists. If you have any arthritis or anything, don't do it too hard. But you can also tighten up your forearms and your biceps. You might feel your arms lift away from your body, your torso a little bit in front of you. Hold it all tightly, and when you're ready, let it go. Next, when you fill up, you can pull your shoulder blades towards each other on your back. Squeeze almost like you're holding a pencil between your shoulder blades. And hold it. And then when you're ready, let it go. Now we're going to just gently stretch your neck a little bit. Only do what's comfortable. I don't know who has injuries and who doesn't, so please know your own body. You can take an inhale in and then gently let your head fall to your right shoulder. Don't force it in any way. Just let it gently fall. Bring it back up to center. Maybe take another good inhale at center. A good exhale. And if it feels good to you, after your next inhale, exhale again and let it just gently fall to the left. Back up to center. Now, if it's comfortable for you, take another inhale and give yourself a very gentle back bend by tipping your head to the sky. You can even arch your back a tiny bit. Come back to center. Next, take another inhale. And on your exhale, you can let your head gently fall to your chest. When you're ready, come back up to center. And now, on your next inhale, bring your arms up above your head, only if this feels good and comfortable to you. Feel yourself rise straight and tall as you reach above. This may be the first time all day you've reached your arms above your shoulders. Feel that stretch. You can even, if you want to, tip a little from side to side. Bring a little bit of movement into it at your own pace with your own breath. Feel your torso stretch a little bit. And with your arms still above your head, reach tall, and we're going to do a very gentle twist. This is not a twist with your neck. This is only a twist with your arms and your torso. So you're going to twist from the waist. Maybe bring your left arm in front of you and your right arm behind you. And just gently look over your right shoulder and just hold it. You're ready. Bring your arms back above your head again. Fill and empty. And then your next breath. Inhale and then exhale the other way. So your right arm comes in front of you and your left arm is behind you. And again, just gently look over your shoulder so you're not forcing anything. And hold. When you're ready, bring your arms back up again. Fill. And you can exhale and bring them back down. With your eyes still closed, we're going to do the face because we hold a tremendous amount of tension in those little tiny muscles in our face. So I invite you to take an inhale and hold, bring your brows together, purse your lips, clench your jaw. Yes, you'll look funny. That's okay. And then let it go. And before we open our eyes, I encourage you to try one more really lovely exercise. I'll lead you through it just verbally. Actually, you know what? This one you may want to open your eyes for. So I encourage you, I guess, to open your eyes. I'm going to teach you this next exercise. It can really help with anxiety, with nervous thinking, can help you if your body is just having a strong nervous system reaction, a lot of tension. So again, maybe fill up with a good deep breath. Let it go. Maybe one more just to bring you kind of back into this moment. This one is called tapping. It's also evidence-based. So I'll just do it and you can follow along with me, but personalize it in terms of speed or gentleness versus like a heavier touch. But you're actually going to be tapping on your own face and a little on your torso. So I always start above the eyebrows. You don't have to. I'm not sure why I do. I just think it feels good. And you're just going to tap gently above each eyebrow. And I always alternate my hands. And then I like to work to my temples. And you can do it 8 times or you can do it 26 times. It's whatever you want. And then I go on the eye bone just beneath the eyes. But like I said, if you miss some or you do them in a different order or you like to start somewhere on your body and work your way up, it's all good. Then next to the nose. And I always like to do right in front of the ears where our jaw meets our skull. We hold a lot of tension in that spot. You can do just under each of the corners of your mouth. You can cross your arms and do your collarbones. This is also really good for our children, with little people in our lives. This is something they can do. They think it's fun. It calms them. You can cross further and give yourself, this is called a butterfly hug. And then you can slowly work your way back up. Back to your collarbones. Back in front of your ears for your jaw. Under the corners of your mouth. The sides of your nose. And under your eyes on the bone, thigh bone. Back to your temples. Back to your forehead. And then I always like to end with the eyebrows. We hold so much tension in those little muscles around our eyebrows. You can put your fingers at the center of your eyebrows and just gently pull. Only to the degree that it feels good to you. But it helps release all those little tiny muscles in our face. Our faces have so many muscles and many, many nerve endings coming from our vagus nerve. And when we just gently do this, we're helping to release some of the tension that gets held in all those muscles. So, and then I encourage you to take another 1 or 2 really good deep breaths in and out. Fill up. Exhale with your mouth open and make an audible sound. See if you feel just a little better now. Sometimes this also feels good. You take each finger, gently touch it to the thumb, back and forth. Kind of brings us back into the moment. You can wiggle your fingers after that. Roll your wrists. Shake out your arms a little bit. Kind of come back into the present moment. So I actually led you through several different tools all at once. So it took about 17 minutes. You can literally take 5 deep breaths. It take maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes. And you will, if you close your eyes and you take those really good deep inhales and you pause, followed by those really long exhales, that will calm your nervous system down. Literally 2 minutes. That's all it takes. The tapping I just did with you, that's called tapping. If somebody has high anxiety, if they're starting to have a panic attack, that can actually shut down a panic attack most of the time. Maybe not always, but a lot of the time. A lot of times when somebody is starting to have a panic attack, or for instance, they're crying really hard, we can't access a deep breath. It's pretty much impossible to take a deep breath, but that is one of the things that helps our nervous system. Tapping is incredible for that. If you're sobbing and you're crying really hard and you kind of can't settle your body down, tapping helps. If you're starting to have a panic attack, tapping helps, and then you can do deep breathing afterwards. If you're just feeling really stressed, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling anxious, the breathing helps tremendously, even just 5 deep breaths. If something has gotten you really worked up in your day, basically the way our brains work is right above our spine at the bottom of our skull. That's the part of our brain that controls fight, flight, freeze. Everything we experience in our day is filtered through our bodies first, and immediately our bodies decide, is this something that I'm perceiving as a threat? I have to trigger my fight or my flight or my freeze. That's the very first thing that happens to us. The next part of the brain that develops is this part of the brain. It's called the limbic part of the brain. That's where our memories are stored. That's where our emotions are centered. That's where our senses are. It's this part of the brain. Information starts in the back works its way forward to this part of the brain. When something upsets you, and the next thing you know, for the next day, all you're doing is telling every single person in your life, oh my God, you won't believe what happened, and blah, 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 blah. That's you trying to get something out of this part of the brain where your emotional center is to work its way to this part of the brain. This is the very last part of the brain that develops, the prefrontal cortex. It doesn't get cooked all the way till we're 26 years old. And this is where you analyze, make decisions, connect action to a consequence or action to result, organize. Did I just say that? Everything comes like that, comes from this part of the brain. When we're worked up and we're upset, we're here, we're not here. We can't access the front part of our brain to make a decision, react, well, actually you choose to respond to something until we settle ourselves enough to let it get to this part of the brain. Everything I just showed you helps you do that faster when you're really worked up about something. So I hope you use some of those breathing exercises. The progressive muscle relaxation exercise is what I led you through with all your muscle groups. I encourage you, if you do it yourselves, repeat each muscle group 3 times. Then it takes about 20 minutes. It's really like an internal massage. If you can't sleep in the middle of the night, it can help you fall back asleep. Even if you don't fall back asleep, it feels good. It relaxes you. So you can also go online and Google progressive muscle relaxation for 15 minutes or progressive muscle relaxation for 30 minutes or meditation for sleep or meditation for stress relief or meditation for chronic pain. There's so many resources online that are free, and it's really healthy for our bodies and for our heads and for our emotions. So that's really the end of what I wanted to share with you. I hope all of you got 1 or 2 or 3 things that will help you going forward. And of course, Sam will have the recording, so you can always ask for it. I'll stay on for a few minutes if there's questions. But thank you for letting me be with you and for letting me share all this with you.
Thank you, Andy. I'm going to let people unmute themselves in case somebody wants to voice a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and we can hear you.
I need help with the situation, and I'm wondering if you can give me any ideas. About 4 or 5 months ago, my husband and I went to the wake of a niece, and we were assured that everybody would be wearing masks. And so we said, yes, we would come. We got there, no one was wearing a mask. We were wearing a mask, we were wearing a shield. I told Don because we might have trouble. We had somebody laugh at us. The niece's husband blamed us for upsetting him and other people. And so we isolated ourselves, and we took a bite of food with us, and we left as soon as we could. And this was mostly family members, and we're some of the oldest people in the family. I have not been able to forgive them. I mean, I felt very betrayed. I felt they didn't care if we got the virus and died. And I just haven't been able to come to terms with this. And I'm just wondering, if you have any suggestions.
So first, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I really, truly am, because you were acting in the interests of your health, your husband's health, and of course, being responsible for the community, for your loved ones. But I'm so sorry you were treated that way, especially at a time of grief. I'm going to say this, and I know it's much easier said than done, and takes time. Forgiveness takes time, but it's hurting you more than it's hurting them. Holding on to that anger or feelings of betrayal is there. I forgot who said it. I don't remember who said it. There's a famous quote that when you hold on to something like that, it's sort of like drinking poison and hoping the person 100 feet away falls. So I know it must be so painful for you because this was your family, but I encourage you to try to do things like journal about your feelings, maybe talk to a therapist where you can process it out in therapy. If there's somebody in your family that's the appropriate person to have a conversation with about how you feel. I don't know your family, so I can't, I can only guess based on how you were treated that they might not be receptive, but maybe you have one family member who would be, where you can have a conversation. I don't know. But a lot of times my feeling is with something like that, it's less about you getting any validation from them and more about you trying to make some kind of peace within yourself and maybe set some very different boundaries with these people who mistreated you. I hope some of that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I definitely do not want to have much of a relationship with them, that's for sure. And I think it's mostly coming to terms with that within myself. And
if you need help, therapy, might be that you do 4 sessions or 5 sessions, but talking it out with somebody might help too. But your reaction's understandable.
Yes, thank you. I think I'll write and do the tapping. Good. And I think that will help, to start releasing it, and yoga and, a bunch of stuff.
That's
I just needed to get it off my chest and get some feedback.
I'm glad you did, and I give you credit for sharing.
All right.
Anybody else have anything? Okay, well, I'll stay on for a couple of minutes and I'll watch the chat just in case. But I thank all of you for being with me tonight. And I encourage you to share this with your loved ones, with your friends. Maybe something you heard tonight will help someone else in your life too.
Thank you, Andy, so much, especially like leading us through that relaxing on a kind of dreary Monday evening. So I hope that helps a lot of people out there. There was a question in the chat box about how to access this video. Once I'm done recording, it will get processed and posted on our website under like our videos on demand. So there you'll find links to all of our programs that have been recorded. They are on our Vimeo page, but if you go to the videos on demand, you'll get sent there. So it should be posted, hopefully, no later than like 2 days from now, but probably someday tomorrow. All right. I'm going to stop the recording.